feel despair and look for opportunities to shift that around to something positive and get my energy again. So I'm very grateful for the work of the group in New Hampshire.
I'm glad you could join us. I'm glad you were able to hear what we were saying.
Thank you. I was very pleased to hear both of you.
So I want to just reflect a bit. I would love to open this up and hear what people, different responses, but we don't have time for that. So what you can do is if you want to enter something in the chat, just a word or two, or a person who came to mind, or what it meant to you, where you felt it, where did you feel it in your body? Because this is really a visceral kind of a message that we encode very early on. This is the heart space where our compassion resides. I'm going to move to, this is going to be a bit of a switch in gears here and in tone. I want to go to Doris's question now, that if we build interdependent ecosystems of compassion, she asked, don't we have to include those as political views or anathema to many of us? You know, for example, the 30% of voting Americans who believe the 2020 election was stolen. So do we really have time to offer compassion to people whose beliefs and actions are accelerating the demise of our democracy, maybe our planet? So I came up with 4 reasons, and I want to give you some examples, little vignettes with each one. I'm going to share my slide again. So here's 4 reasons I came up with, and I'm in the conversation, I want to hear other ideas, or put them in the chat if you can think of some other motives for cultivating compassion for our adversaries. And I see these on a spectrum, with each subsequent motive leading deeper into that I-thou relationship that Martin Buber espouses and articulates. So the first is transactional. If I offer compassion to my opponent, he might move closer to my point of view. The second is restorative. Cultivating compassion rejuvenates me. The third is relational. If I offer you compassion, it opens opportunities for mutual understanding. And the fourth and most meaningful, I think, is reparative. Offering you compassion opens opportunities for mutual healing. So let's take the first one, the transactional element. And these are not rigorous, as you know. I mean, these are just concepts that overlap. The best example I can think of the transactional is George Wallace, you know, the ultimate consummate racist, the guy who stood on the steps of the Alabama State House saying, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Well, you know, few people know that he actually renounced these views in 1979. And in 1982, he won the general election for the 4th time as governor, and he received over 90% of the Black vote. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Well, how did that happen? In 1972, he was running for president, and he was campaigning in Landover, Maryland, and was shot in the back, in the spine, and spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. While he was convalescing in a Montgomery hospital, he was visited by none other than Shirley Chisholm, the Black congressman from California, who suspended her campaign. She was also running for president. She came to his bedside, and when she walked in, Wallace said, "What are you doing here? What are your people going to say when they find out?" And she said, "I don't care what my people say. What happened to you shouldn't happen to anybody." And his daughter, Peggy Wallace Kennedy, noted that as the turning point in his transformation. In 1979, he went on to renounce racism publicly, and then in 1982 received over 90% of the Black vote and appointed more Blacks to positions of the administration than any previous governor. Okay, so that's pretty powerful, but that's the first level. Then there's the restorative. So I'm going to tell you a tale of 3 college roommates or classmates Bruce is on the left, and Andy is on the right. And the three of us graduated from college in 1970. And I stayed in touch with both of them, but they hadn't seen each other until the summer when they both came to my house and stayed overnight. And we had a wonderful time. We stayed up really late into the night, drinking single malt scotch and reminiscing. And at one point, Bruce, who's a feet on the ground's advocate, he belongs to NUOR, it's New Rochelle Against Racism. They're a very active advocacy group. He said, Joel, when I'm at a city council meeting calling out the police chief's racism, what added value is there in recognizing his humanity? For Bruce, advocacy is energizing. And for Andy and me, it's enervating. It's just climbing a mountain every time. Andy's a retired sociology professor, and he restores his energy by studying and reading and analyzing and publishing and writing articles for lay audiences that humanize people on all sides of the political spectrum. And I'm a retired family doctor, which energizes me when I'm with people that recreates those moments in the exam room that I cherish so much, when I'm with people very different from me and able to recognize their common humanity. So I was so inspired by this clarification, because I've been struggling with this ever since I learned about and participated in compassionate listening. What is the role of compassion in advocacy? And being a left brain dominant guy, I came up with this Venn diagram. And this really helped me get a better fix on this. So Bruce is the advocacy guy, gut wisdom, justice, shalt thou pursue. Andy's the study guy, head wisdom, reason, knowledge, discernment, education. And I'm the heart guy, I'm the compassion guy, the healing guy. And of course, we're not separate, we overlap. And we each share what the other gets energy for. And one of the things that clarified this dilemma to me when I put it on a Venn diagram was, you know what? This is a prayer, or it evokes a prayer that we Jews say every Shabbat when we take the Torah out of the Ark. Al shlosha divarim ha'olam omed, al ha'torah v'al ha'avodah v'al gemilut chasadim. On these three things does the world stand: Torah, head wisdom; worship, which for me is making myself visible to the holy in the company of other people, which is my heart wisdom; and the good deeds of Bruce, gemilut chasadim, gut wisdom. Okay, we've got then the relational motive. When I offer you compassion, I create opportunities for mutual understanding and might even recognize an element of truth in your point of view. Mark Nepo, the poet and philosopher, has written, "To listen is to lean in softly with the willingness to be changed by what I hear." One of my most vivid experiences with this was the compassionate listening trip we took to Alabama in 2020. And we met people from across the political spectrum, right-wing Republicans, Trump supporters, people on the far left, civil rights icons. And one of the messages we heard when people let down their guard and became comfortable and felt safe around us was resentment of Northerners. You Northerners think we're all, and this is a paraphrase, but basically it was the same message. You Northerners think we're stupid, we're benighted, we're ignorant. You know better than us. You have the one pathway on truth. And you know what? We resent that. And the fourth or fifth time I heard that, spoken out of compassion, I was able to lean in softly with a willingness to be changed by what I heard. And recall Becky's commentary about the benefits of cultural diversity, right? Monocultures in human societies are more susceptible to a wide range of maladies: tribalism, arrogance, intolerance, demonization. And if you think I'm referring to the Stop the Steal gang, no, I'm talking about me in my mini monocultural bubble in Concord's West End, where 15 of my 16 neighbors look and talk and act and vote just like me. Okay, let's go to the fourth reason for compassion for our opponents. Reparative. When I offer you compassion, I create opportunities for mutual healing. So here's a story I love. summarized by Peter Beinart in May in an article in Jewish Currents. In 1977, Palestinian-American graduate student George Bisharat traveled to the West Jerusalem neighborhood of Talbia, and he knocked on the door of the house his grandfather had built and been robbed of in the 1948 war. The elderly woman who answered the door told him his family had never lived there. The humiliation of having to plead to enter my family's home burned inside me, Bisharat later wrote. In 2000, by then a law professor, he returned with his family, and as his wife and his children looked on, while a man originally from New York answered the door and told him the same thing. It was not his family's home. But after Bisharat chronicled his experiences, he received an invitation from a former soldier who had briefly lived in the house after the Haganah seized it in 1948. When they met, the man said, "I am sorry. I was blind. What we did was wrong." And then he added, "I owe your family 3 months' rent." In that moment, Bisharat wrote, I experienced an untapped reservoir of Palestinian magnanimity and goodwill that could transform the relations between the two peoples and make things possible that are not possible today. When I offer you compassion, I create opportunities for mutual healing. So let's come back now to the connection between compassion and suffering. Bryan Stevenson, that remarkable lawyer who created the Equal Justice Initiative and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, wrote in his book, Just Mercy, we're all broken by something. We've all hurt someone and have been hurt. We all share the condition of brokenness, even if our brokenness is not equivalent. Our shared vulnerability and imperfection nurtures and sustains our capacity for compassion. We have a choice. We can embrace our humanness, which means embracing our broken natures and the compassion that remains our best hope for healing, or we can deny our brokenness, forswear compassion, and as a result, deny our own humanity. Embracing our brokenness creates a need and desire for mercy, perhaps a corresponding need to show mercy. When you experience mercy, you learn things that are hard to learn otherwise. You see things you can't otherwise see. You hear things you can't otherwise hear. You begin to recognize the humanity that resides in each of us. Now, this is a hard ask, right? Especially when we're in a heightened state of reactivity, in the company of somebody who really triggers us. And to be able to do that in that moment, we have to have been exercising our compassion muscle on a regular basis. What are the ways to do that? Well, I think the best advice is what Bryan Stevenson's grandmother told him. You can't understand most of the important things from a distance, Bryan. You have to get close. So there are books to read, sure, and movies to watch, and podcasts to listen to. But to get close, you have to be in the company of our opponents. So I want to open it up now to conversation. And here's some ideas that I just want to know. Has anyone had experiences with reaching across the chasm, let's call it the chasm? Living Room Conversations is an organization that structures conversations among neighbors who have very different points of view, simply to humanize one to the other. Krista Tippett has something called Civil Conversations Project. I have a list of references in which I can show you the links to these. It's a very similar thing, and it's a beautiful template that describes how to do this. An organization called Braver Angels, which some of you are familiar with. And then there's the Compassionate Listening Project. And guess what? We've got an upcoming trip to Alabama on April 19th through the 27th that's open for anybody who wants to get close to people on all sides of the political spectrum. You've all seen this. but I have to read it. Returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness can't drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate can't drive out hate. Only love can do that. And I'll end with this. You can safely assume you've created God in your own image when it turns out God hates all the same people you do. By Anne Lamott. So, share your story. Let's see, we have some time. Yeah, we have 10 minutes. I want to hear who's tried to reach out, who's done it successfully. And if you wanted to, but haven't been able to, if that's the case, what's holding you back? And when is cultivating compassion for our adversaries inappropriate or harmful? How politically diverse is the microculture in which you live or work or play? Who are your best buds? What books or movies or podcasts help you humanize the other? And what resources do you use to fortify you against despair? And you can put your responses in the chat, or Will, maybe you can give some instructions about how to raise hands. We welcome chat responses or also individual stories, but since there are 22 people on the call, I'm going to advise people that if you want to speak to this, try to keep it short. Let's step in and then step back so other people have the opportunity to have some bandwidth.
Usually the way I've done Q&A is you can put your question in the chat and I'll read it aloud so that Joel can respond, or you can put an asterisk in the chat or use the hand raise function on Zoom and I'll call on you and you can ask yourself.
Joel, could you put up those questions again on the shared screen so that we can
Yes.
see it as reflecting? Thank you.
I will do that. I was going to add another one. Who's more confused at the end of this hour than at the beginning?
Well, I'll jump in on the first one. I have a close by neighbor, a young family with young children, and they're extremely anti-vaccine. Not only that they don't get it, but the wife rants on Facebook about all the crazy, terrible things that people are doing that support the vaccinations. And I was just thinking this morning as I was opening the blinds and looking across at my neighbors' houses, how that has affected our community. And the trouble is, Joel, I don't think I've got a good answer to this. So I'm sort of stuck on the first question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to listen.
Yes, and I don't have good answers either. I just found out that in Ottawa, the city is being brought to a halt by truckers who are creating 24/7 honking to protest all of that. So, yes. Who's tried to do this? Who's reached across? I know, yes, I'll just wait for Will. Do you want to call on somebody?
I'm not seeing asterisks or...
I think it's not Arison Wells. It's Arison's...
Diane. It's Diane.
Diane, yes.
Diane, go ahead.
You're muted.
You're still muted, Diane. Should be the Well, let's let David go. David's unmuted, so we'll let
I
David
got
and we'll
it.
come back. Oh, go ahead,
I got
Diane.
it.
Oh, Diane.
I just wanted to
Go for it.
say I have been working with a young family, and they've helped me and I've helped them. And they love to come to my summer place on the lake. And they knew last summer that they could not come there unless they got vaccinated, because I had too many older, nieces and, myself. And they realized that they were there was no reason why not to get a shot. I told them if a doctor told they couldn't have it, don't get it. They both got shots. So I took them out to their birthday and we had dinner. So sometimes it's just the compassion. I wouldn't let them hurt other people, and they couldn't hurt me if they didn't get a shot. Cause I just said, I trust you if you get 2 shots, but I can't trust you if you don't have one. The other thing is I'm having a hard time. I want to invite my neighbor to come and have coffee so we could talk. She ran for the school board, yet she never has said hello to me in 5 years, but she said hello to me when she was running for the school board. So I said, let's have coffee together and just talk. But she's never been able to set up a time with it. She's shy, she's afraid. I don't know, I don't know how to open up that, because I do believe definitely in closeness to help people feel compassion to one another. So I loved everything I've heard today. And I realized most of what I thought about when I was talking was the people who help me do what I'm doing, but not about why. And I realized listening to all of you, I realized they helped me because they believed in me, and I love them because they were kind to me. So I'm learning a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Diane. We'll get to David in just a sec. Bill Maddox put in the chat that he's participated in Braver Angels and also is interested in deep canvassing, which is something that I've heard about. I know people who have done that. I don't know if Bill wants to speak to that or not. It's a way of really humanizing the person. It has an ulterior motive. So it's at that first level of compassion, which is you really hope that who you're talking to might be influenced by what you say. But the people who do it really seem to feel connected to the people that they're canvassing. David,
Yeah,
did you?
Joel, I'll just speak very briefly on it.
Please.
I think what's really interesting about deep canvassing is that it really requires about 70% of your time listening, which if anybody's ever canvassed before, that's not the normal way that you do it, because you're really just out to get a message across and get on to the next house. So this really requires you to take your time and really find out what someone is going through and what are the things that are really important to them. And I think from a political organizing standpoint, it makes so much sense, but it's very, very hard to do. We don't normally take time within that space to do that kind of thing, but it's been very effective in helping people to find some common ground and even move people. There's a few great articles about moving people pretty significantly from the first position. You ask them in the beginning where their position is on a 1 to 10 scale. And then after talking for quite a while, you ask them again, and very often you move them along the kind of ideological divide. So it's really interesting. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. David, did you have something you wanted to share?
Along the lines that Bill mentioned, my friend Paula Green in Leverett, Mass, after the Trump election, was looking for a way to reach out to the red towns to the west of Leverett, which is very blue. And, I'm using stereotypes there, but she could not find any takers. But eventually, and Paul has been involved in conflict transformation work around the world, in Serbia, in Rwanda, so she's experienced in this. She eventually found a partner in Eastern Kentucky in the coal fields of Letcher County, a woman named Gwen, who lives right up the road from one of my old friends from when I worked in Eastern Kentucky. And I find I have no problems talking with Gwen. The group, Paula formed a group called Hands Across the Hills, which has been having dialogue between these two very, very different communities, different in many, many ways, not just in political persuasion. I find my connection to the people in Eastern Kentucky is shared stories, old relationships, friendships, meals shared, walks in the woods. Those things build relationship in a way that allows space for difference of opinion, even tremendous difference of opinion. And I respect Gwen because I know her heart is there for her community, and she respects me, and that respect just goes a long, long way.
That's a really powerful message, David. I'm reading Arlie Hochschild's book, Strangers in Their Own Land, and she does exactly that. She lives among these people and finds out that they're more like her, she's more like them than they are different. It's just an astounding revelation. So kudos to you for doing that.
So, question in the chat from Judy Ullman, and I may ask you, Judy, to expound a little bit because I'm not sure I understand it. I always wonder about power. When is compassionate listening inappropriate? Can you say a little more about that, Judy, just to make sure we're...
Yeah. Hi, Joel.
Hi, Judy.
I'm trying to make sense of when it's a question that was in your list. I think that some of the problems that we have today are because we don't, some people have power and other people don't. And how do we change that? And is compassionate listening an appropriate approach? I also I haven't been out of my bubble, and I guess it was Becky who was talking about a neighbor who didn't want to get vaxxed. And I also know somebody who doesn't want to get vaxxed. But when I was listening to Becky, it seemed clear that both people want health, and we just define it differently. It's not so easy when I think of the people I know. Anyway, so those are two separate things. Do you understand better now? Well,
I do. Thank you.
Okay.
And, the substrate to this for me, the sine qua non, there's going to be no peace with justice unless we can see each other as inhabiting the same ecosystem. Back to Becky's point that she made in November, there's no hope for humanity unless we can humanize our opponents. And that's not tactical. That's not even strategic in the short term, but in the long term, I would say that's what we've got to have.
I know Siddhartha has a question. Siddhartha, do you want to jump in?
Thanks, Will. I've tried to answer your basic question in all my years here to reach out and establish relationships across the divides of race and nationality. And what better country to attempt that kind of thing in, except the United States, which is probably the most diverse country in the world. But I must confess that at some point, I arrive at the conclusion that to go to your diagrams of the two overlapping circles and the part in the middle, where the circles overlap, it's a little bit like a Venn diagram, I think, that there's a vast gulf which is experiential between people who come, say, from my part of the world and people of color and folks who are in the majority in this country. And until that experiential gap can be closed, I've really come to the conclusion that even the most well-intentioned attempt at building bridges will not work. In fact, it'll fail. And we are attempting this, and we are talking about this at a particularly inopportune time, I think, in American history. Not to say that we shouldn't, we should, because of the impact of international events on relationships between white Americans and the rest of us, not only in America, but the rest of the world. There's a huge gulf of trust also, which I would add to the gulf in experience. And these things, I think, are two insurmountable barriers, at least as of now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Siddhartha.
Well, we are a bit beyond 8. Usually we try to cut off right at 8. I just want to, there's one, I'm just going to read off Jennifer's comment. There are many ideological divides, not just one. I've limited myself to trying to connect and show compassion to those in my worldwide religious fellowship who are theologically very different than I, and who react negatively to LGBT people like myself. I found it too challenging and withdrew from the work several years ago, but I feel the need to get back into it for my own good. Though I hope to help reduce some demonization, I believe is still driving resistance to fuller fellowship. Just wanted to make sure that we read that and had a chance to consider it.
I just wanted to say, Will, that basically I wanted to say, not all of us are capable of reaching out across some of these divides, but there are always divides that we can push ourselves to reach across and make some difference. And find that there are surprising ways in which people help your inner self as well as you may be helping theirs.
So, Joel, did you want to give any last thoughts before we say goodnight for the night?
Well, as Becky said, on November 14th, this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end. And I was really delighted, energized to take the baton from Becky and run my lap. It was really clarifying for me in so many ways. And I really did discover some spiritual roots that I wasn't naming. And I want to hand off the baton to somebody else. So I'm hoping that you'll have another runner in this race to continue the conversation.
I am committed to finding that runner. So thank you so much, Joel, for leading us through this second installment in the series. I want to make sure folks are aware that next Monday, a week from today, we're going to have Dr. Joseph Gerson. He's going to talk to us. Initially, the talk was China and the nuclear arms race, but for those who've heard Joseph before, he's also an expert on U.S.-Russia policy and the Ukraine, and has been over many times. So Dr. Gerson is going to extend his presentation to an hour and a half instead of our usual hour, to delve into the crisis in Ukraine. 2 weeks after that, Michael Clare and Denise Duffield are going to talk about nuclear danger and the Back from the Brink campaign. That'll be February 28th. March 14th, we're going to hear from some folks mobilizing Youth for Peace with Friends Forever in Northern Ireland. So join us next Monday and every other Monday from now until we're not able to do it anymore. So thank you all for being with us tonight, and we'll see you soon.